The day I was fired started with a sound I will never forget. The thin, wheezy whistle of my son trying to breathe through a chest that felt full of gravel. It was 5:12 a.m., and the sky over Eastwood Avenue was the color of a bruise. I sat on the bathroom floor with Noah wrapped in my robe, the steam from the shower curling around us like warm ghosts, while the nebulizer hummed its tired lullaby, and my phone vibrated with a call I didn't want to answer. "Can you get in by 8?" my boss asked as casually as if he were ordering coffee. I told him my son had been up all night. Fever, coughing fits, vomit on the sheets, a pulse ox that had dipped lower than my bank account. There was a pause, and then he said the sentence that split my life clean down the middle. "Just get by, Mallory. Get by." 2 words like a locked door. 2 words that said be smaller. 2 words that made me look at the wallpaper curling in the corner of our apartment and think of all the things I had been getting by from. A marriage that collapsed into dust. A second-hand sedan that swallowed half my pay in repair bills. A schedule stitched together with babysitters, neighbors, and favors I could never repay. I had PTO accrued. I had emails from HR confirming. I had a kid whose doctor had circled high risk with a red pen so hard it left a dent in the paper. I had all of that, and still, get by. I didn't go in. I chose the hospital. I chose the fluorescent hell of triage, the wristband, the monitor that pinged like a tiny metronome measuring our fear, the nurse with tired eyes who said, "You did the right thing, Mom," at 11:43 a.m. And while Noah finally slept under a thin white blanket, my phone filled with messages. One from a colleague that read, "Watch your back." One from HR asking me to clarify attendance, and then the calendar invite for a performance alignment at 4 p.m. The subject line had a single heavy word, urgent. I told myself I was being dramatic, that this was a misunderstanding, that companies with branded tote bags and morale emails about family don't fire single moms for taking their child to the ER, but trauma teaches you to read tone like an X-ray. The tone of that invite was not concern, it was calculation. At 3:58, I joined from a plastic chair outside pediatrics, hands shaking. My supervisor, Trent, wore his usual half-smile, that corporate mask that says I'm just the messenger. HR was there too, a woman I'd only seen at holiday parties, lips pressed tight, eyes skipping past me like a rock skimming water. They said words like inconsistency, business needs, unreliable availability. I said words like medical, documentation, FMLA, PTO. And then Trent cleared his throat and repeated, almost verbatim, the line he'd already given me. "We need people who can get by without disrupting the team." He said it like get by was a corporate competency. He said it like caregivers are noise. He said it like my son's lungs were a scheduling inconvenience, like my motherhood was a bad habit. The rest blurred. The call ended. The email arrived, termination effective immediately, and the floor underneath my plastic chair felt suddenly like a trapdoor. There's a version of this story that stops there. A mother crushed under the boot of a system that counts bodies but not breath. That's the version they wanted. The quiet one. The private grief. But here's the part I didn't know that morning as the nebulizer sang and my boss perfected his impersonation of a human. Someone inside my company had been counting more than my missed hours. Someone had been tagging us, sorting us. I wouldn't learn that for days, not until a text pinged from an unknown number with a single file attached. Reliability, Matrix, V3 XLSX. And a note that said, "You didn't hear this from me." The file had columns that looked harmless until you understood what they were. Names, departments. A percentage called Dependability Index. A flag called Caregiver Risk. Next to my name, a red dot. Next to other names I recognized. Women with strollers. Men who left early on Thursdays for chemo with their fathers. A woman who'd just had twins. Red dots, red dots, red dots. It was all there, not in the shadows, but in cells with borders and formulas, calculated, updated weekly. The lies were efficient. The weapon had a legend. I didn't know any of that as I cradled Noah's damp hair and watched cartoons on mute while he slept. All I knew was that my job was gone, my rent due, my refrigerator apologetically bare. All I knew was the echo of a command that had never been designed for me. Get by. Like survival is a hobby. Like love is a glitch. Like we are not the ones making the world run while it pretends not to see us. But this is not a story about disappearing. It's a story about what happens when you refuse to be the quiet proof that the machine works. It's about the people who show up in your life at the worst moment with a flashlight and a file you didn't ask for. It's about a red dot that turned into a flare. It's about the day I realized get by is code for stay silent, and I chose not to. My name is Mallory Hayes. I'm 34. I live in a 2-bedroom walk-up in a block of brick buildings that sweat in the summer and whistle in the winter. I drink my coffee standing up because sitting is a luxury when you're hustling 3 jobs inside one body. I can unclog a sink, calm a nightmare at 2:37 a.m., and calculate late fees in my head with the accuracy of a tax auditor. My son Noah is 8, long-limbed and stubborn, with eyes so serious they make you tell him the truth. He was born on a Tuesday during a thunderstorm with lungs that decided to be dramatic from the jump. If you're a mother of a kid with breathing issues, you know the soundtrack of our lives. Wheeze, cough, silence, panic, nebulizer, prayer. Before the firing, I worked as a project coordinator at Meridian Freight Analytics, a logistics company that put glossy words on cardboard problems. We were the Excel people, the ones who made routes and drivers and packages behave, like traffic could be tricked into kindness if you just color-coded it. I was good, better than good. I learned the names of every warehouse shift manager. I remembered their kids' birthdays. I knew where 1,500 pallets were at any given moment, and why 3 of them would inevitably go missing on a Friday after lunch. My supervisor, Trent, told me I was a natural translator between chaos and numbers. I wore that compliment like armor because single mothers collect armor the way other people collect mugs. I won't lie to you. I needed that job. Not for the identity, to be honest. The title made my mother smile more than it made me feel anything, but for the math. Rent, insurance, the inhalers that always seemed to be temporarily out of stock, the school fundraiser I couldn't afford but pretended to forget, the daycare we had graduated from but still owed, the daily catastrophe fund for things like shoe soles disintegrating and refrigerator light bulb dying like it pays rent. You know the math. It's not cute. It's not inspirational. It's relentless. So when Noah's fever spiked and his breathing turned into that terrible whistle, I did the thing mothers do. I made choices other people like to call sacrifices, as if I set something on fire and watched it burn, when really I was grabbing the only lifeline that mattered. Hospital over office, child over chart. I pinged Trent. I pinged HR. Using PTO today, I wrote, attaching a photo of the doctor's note like my kid's lungs needed a permission slip. I thought that would be enough. I had followed the rules. I had earned the time. I had the paperwork. Maybe you're laughing at my naivete. I am now. But that morning, I still believed rules were fences that protected, not cages that kept you in place while someone measured your worth to a decimal point. When the termination email landed, the world did that thing where it gets very loud and very quiet at the same time. I could hear everything, the beeping, the shuffling, the TV braying about discounted mattresses, and nothing. The part of me that keeps lists, plans, schedules, went blank. The subject line said, separation, which is a pretty word for a cruel act. The body said I was not meeting the availability standards of the role. The attachment said, severance, none. This is where you come in. Not because you can fix this. Not because a like or a subscribe will transform into a bag of groceries, though sometimes they do. The internet has its miracles. You come in because stories are the only currency I have that multiplies when shared. If you are watching this, if you are reading this, if you are a mother or a father or a solo parent or a child who remembers the smell of a hospital blanket, I want you to do 2 things for me. First, subscribe. Yes, I'm asking. Hit it. That little button is an act of defiance in a world that expects us to whisper. Second, tell me where you are. Drop your city, your country, your block, your kitchen with the flickering light, your car where you're hiding to cry. Tell me where you're watching from, because I want to see the map of us. I want to know how far a single story can reach. I'm not going to give you everything at once. That's not how life works, and it's not how this worked for me. I didn't go from fired to furious to fearless in a straight line. I went from bewildered to bargaining to a kind of cold clarity that felt like stepping out into winter air. There were days I thought I'd made it all up, that I was difficult, that I should have tried harder to be small. There were nights I read labor laws at my kitchen table while noodles boiled over and thought, this can't be legal, right? And then there was the text, the file, the red dot. That didn't arrive until after the rent was due, after I pawned my grandmother's locket to buy groceries, and then cried in the parking lot because the locket felt like more than metal. After my neighbor, Miss Ruth, 67, retired nurse, the unofficial mayor of our floor, slipped $20 in an envelope under my door with a note, "For the boys' juice. Pay me with a story." After I answered a number I didn't recognize and listened to a voice I didn't know say, "I don't sleep well in clean consciences. We'll get there. For now, I want you to know 3 things. 1. If you are a parent who has missed a shift because a child needed you and you paid for it with a threat, a warning, a firing, you are not crazy. The system is designed to pretend your child is optional. 2. There are people inside that system who see you and hate what they're asked to do. They are not saints. They are not saviors. They are scared, and sometimes their fear cracks just enough to let the truth out. 3. I am going to tell you what happened next, not because I think you need my bravery, but because I needed yours and didn't know where to find it until I started speaking. Subscribe. Tell me where you're watching from. Then keep going with me. I promise you this story has turns. I promise I didn't expect the ones that hit hardest. I promise you that Get By was only the first mask that dropped. 2 days after the firing, I put Noah on the couch with a fort of pillows and a stack of library books we had checked out before the wheels came off. He was bored in the way only kids recovering are, restless but fragile, full of questions that leapfrog logic. "Are you still the boss of the logistics?" he asked me, pronouncing it logistics like something you snap and it lights on fire. I told him I wasn't anyone's anything for a minute, and he nodded solemnly as if I had explained a weather pattern. Then he fell asleep with his hand in the bag of crackers and his breath steady for the first time in days. I opened my laptop to hunt for jobs with the hungry panic of a person who can taste the end of her leash. The job boards were full of positions that wanted me to be available nights, weekends, whenever we feel like it, for salaries that might cover groceries if we ate illusions. My email pinged from HR Meridian, and for a second, I had that reflex, that hope that refuses to die, the one that thinks maybe they reconsidered. They hadn't. It was a termination checklist. Return laptop. Return badge. Return the hoodie with the embroidered logo they'd insisted was a gift, then charged us for out of a payroll deduction. The subject line was polite. The body was procedural. At the bottom was a final paragraph. "We value your time at Meridian and wish you the best moving forward." If sarcasm had a font, it would be that paragraph. At 9:17 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but I know what they did. Check your email." Attached was a screenshot, an emailed alert titled Reliability Matrix, Weekly Update. The sender was someone high enough to have an assistant, and the recipients were people who make problems disappear. The attachment name stared at me. Reliability, Matrix, V3.xlxx. I refreshed my inbox and there it was. No subject, no message, just the file. I'm not reckless. I'm a mother. There's a difference. I scanned it for viruses, opened it in a sandbox, did all the things the internet tells you to do before you click the mystery. Then I clicked. The spreadsheet bloomed on my screen, a garden of cells pretending to be neutral. Column A, employee name. Column B, department. Column C, dependability index, a number between 0 and 1, with conditional formatting that turned it green if you were close to 1, red if you were close to unemployed. Column D, absence type flag, sick, PTO, unexcused care. Column E, caregiver risk, low, medium, high. Column F, action, coach, monitor, exit. There were tabs for each region. There were pivot tables that sorted us like bolts. There were tiny notes in the upper right corners of cells, comments from managers shading like gossip. New baby, watch. Elder care, pattern. Single mom, potential reliability issue. Caregiver risk, high. Action, exit. Next to my name, my dependability index was 0.83, yellow. My absence type flag said care. The action cell had a drop-down arrow. Someone had selected exit. I shut the laptop like it had bitten me. I paced the kitchen, counting the balding lines between tiles to keep from screaming. Miss Ruth heard me through the wall. She has a sixth sense for storms. "You want tea or the truth?" she said when I knocked. "Both," I said, and she made chamomile and listened as if listening were triage. "I worked 30 years with doctors who would cancel a man's shift if his dog sneezed and send a woman with a fever back to the ICU," she said. They call it efficiency. I call it convenient cruelty. What are you going to do? I told her I didn't know, that I needed to think like a person, not a target, that I had a file I shouldn't have, that I was probably being watched now in ways I couldn't see. Good, she said, surprising me. Now they're nervous too. The unknown number texted again. We should talk. I can't use my phone. Tomorrow, 11 a.m., the coffee cart by the courthouse. Wear something bright so I can spot you. It was a terrible spy movie plan, and yet the only one I had. I wore Noah's blue scarf over my coat like a flag, and pushed a stroller with grocery bags to look like a woman running errands. The person who approached me wore a wool hat too low, and sunglasses too big for winter. I'm Aisha, she said. We met once at the Q4 All Hands, Talent Analytics. My stomach dropped. The department that had turned people into metrics had a friendly name. I shouldn't be doing this, she said, but I haven't slept in months. She told me what I had suspected, and what I hadn't dared to fully frame. Meridian had a reliability initiative, tied to a tax incentive for workforce stability. The company got sweetened contracts and credits if they kept absenteeism below a threshold that was impossible in a real human life. To hit the number, they built a tool. To feed the tool, they labeled us. Anyone with predictable care obligations became a variable to control. We were told it was just data, Aisha said, voice shaking. But when I saw the action column being used as a firing cue, I realized I wasn't working with data. I was loading the gun. She had tried to raise concerns. She had been told she didn't understand the business realities. She had been told to be pragmatic. She had been told to get by. When I saw your row, she said, I thought if I sent it to you, maybe I'd sleep. I haven't, but maybe you will. I didn't feel brave. I felt like I had been handed a live wire. My choices were to drop it and pretend my hand hadn't burned, or carry it and risk lighting up the dark. I went home with the file on a flash drive hidden in a box labeled Old Cables, because no one ever opens that one. I read. I circled names. I recognized a young dad who did the daycare pickup shuffle, a woman whose mother had moved in with dementia, a middle-aged man in shipping, veteran, who told everyone jokes at 5 p.m., so we'd leave laughing. Red dots, yellow cells, actions chosen. I called a legal aid clinic and left a message. I emailed a journalist whose byline I recognized from a story about a warehouse where the heat broke on Christmas Eve. I wrote HR and said I wanted copies of all documents related to my termination. I started a private group chat with 3 women from my team and asked them to check their personnel files for anything that mentioned care, dependability, or reliability. I should have been looking for a new job. I was in the slivered hours. But anger is an accelerant when you've been taught to fold. That night, as if the universe had arranged a perverse test, Noah had another attack, less severe, still terrifying. We did the steam and the stories and the counting his breaths to anchor my own. When he fell asleep, I opened the spreadsheet again and noticed something I'd missed, a column hidden between E and F. I unhid it with a tiny, shaking motion of the mouse. Column F, legal exposure, low, med, high. Next to my name, low, unlikely to litigate. I laughed. It wasn't funny. It was a sound my body made as it decided something for me. They thought I wouldn't fight, that I didn't know the words, the people, the rules. They thought mothers who carry inhalers and grocery lists aren't dangerous. That hidden column was a miscalculation. I screenshotted it as if truth could vanish from a file like breath on a mirror. Somewhere, a person had selected low with the gentle indifference of a morning choice. Oat milk or regular, exit or coach, fight or fold. The call from the journalist came 3 days later. Her name was Viv. She spoke with the clipped calm of someone who has seen institutions pretend to be confused. I can't promise anything, she said, but I can tell you this file is not nothing. She asked me questions I hadn't anticipated. Did anyone else have a similar experience? How long had the reliability initiative been in place? Had I saved metadata? I had, thanks to a habit I call future-proofing against gaslighting. Could I get corroboration? Maybe. Did I understand the risk? No, not fully, but yes, enough. Viv wanted documents. She wanted quotes. She wanted a second source inside. I wanted a guarantee that if I stuck my head above the crowd, someone wouldn't swing. She couldn't give me that. But I can tell you, she said, these stories crack only when someone refuses to be the hinge. We agreed to stay in touch. I closed my laptop and felt like the apartment had shifted on its foundations. The legal aid clinic called back. A woman named Carmen who had heard my voicemail in my voice. Quick, polite, near breaking, and decided to return it first. She listened. She asked for the file. She said words that sounded like a reprieve: retaliation, unlawful discrimination, caregiver status. We've been seeing a pattern, she said carefully, conspiratorially, like we were trading recipes for rebellion. Employers are automating cruelty, and then acting surprised when the machine breaks hearts. We can file a complaint. We can request preservation of records. We can make them say quiet things out loud. I thought the climax of this story would be the article going live, or the attorney filing a suit, or a courtroom hushed as my voice echoed under a judge's stare. But the moment that split me open happened somewhere else, smaller and louder, at Meridian's quarterly town hall, broadcast live to all employees. I still had the link. It had been in my calendar when I was still a wee. I checked it out of curiosity more than strategy. My heart wasn't wise enough to know that curiosity is sometimes the fuse. Trent was on stage in a blazer that fit like a confession, standing in front of the company's slogan, delivering what matters. The irony had a smell. He talked about growth, resilience, market share, the usual word soup boiled down to a glaze that tastes like nothing. The CEO thanked our HR and talent teams for innovations in workforce planning. I clicked the chat window. It was, at first, the standard stream of emojis, and congrats, and great quarter, and so proud. And then a comment slid by so quickly I almost missed it. What about the reliability matrix targeting caregivers? It disappeared. The moderator had a quick hand. But then another popped up. Why are single parents flagged as high risk? Disappeared. And another. Caregiver isn't a defect. Disappeared. Viv messaged me. Is this you? It wasn't. Someone else had the file, or had heard, or had a conscience that had reached its boiling point. The chat began to pulse with comments that lasted a second before deletion. We see you. Stop. Explain. The moderator slowed, overwhelmed. Comments began to stick. The CEO's voice tightened around words like misunderstanding and context. Trent leaned toward the mic and said, crisp as ice, "We don't penalize care." The chat erupted. Someone wrote, "Tell that to Mallory Hayes." It is a strange thing to watch your name become a banner in a place that tried to delete you. Viv typed, "Do you want to say something?" I didn't. Not there. Not like that. I wanted control. I wanted the truth laid out like evidence on a white table. I wanted the red dots to become a chorus, not a spectacle. But I also wanted to take my name back from other people's mouths. I unmuted. It was reckless. It was perfect. "Hi," I said. The camera cut to me because I had been an attendee. The system didn't know I was a ghost. "I'm Mallory. You fired me last week after I took my son to the ER. You told me to get by. And you have a spreadsheet that turns love into liability." The silence was expensive. Trent's face did something human then. He flinched. The CEO defaulted to training. "We can't discuss personnel matters in a public..." I spoke over him, polite as a blade. "You've already discussed my life in columns and rows. You've already decided which of us is convenient. You made a column called Legal Exposure, like justice is a contaminant to be measured. You selected low next to my name. You were wrong." Aisha texted me, "I'm here." And then, "I'm going to speak." Her voice entered the stream, anonymous at first. "I built the metric," she said. "I'm sorry." She didn't say her name. She didn't need to. The specificity was its own signature. We were told it was optimizing. We were incentivized to hit a number. We made a number out of your children. That's what we did. The chat went from emojis to words to declarations. A supervisor from Dallas admitted he'd been coached to push out high-risk employees before annual reviews. A warehouse lead wrote that his team was disciplined for swapping shifts to cover a kid's surgery. HR tried to regain control with statements about values and family-friendly policies, and the comments laughed, a low, bitter sound made of hundreds of keyboards. Viv messaged, "This is the story." Carmen messaged, "Preserve everything." Screenshot. Miss Ruth messaged. Somehow she had found the link through a neighbor. "Keep breathing." Noah woke up from his nap and stumbled into the living room, hair wild, eyes wide. "Are you on TV?" he asked. "Something like that," I said, and he climbed into my lap and leaned his head against my chest, our breaths setting a rhythm I could keep time to. The CEO tried one last pivot. "We are committed to learning," he said. "We will review." The room behind him was too quiet for a real company in crisis. Trent spoke without looking at the camera. We ask people to get by because we thought everyone has to. He swallowed. But some of us are carried. I don't know if he meant it. I don't know what part was calculation and what part was a crack in the mask. What I do know is that a story had just outrun the people paid to control it. Viv signed off to file. Carmen filed an injunction letter to preserve records. Aisha sent me an audio memo that would later become the spine of the case, a recording from a strategy meeting where a VP said, "Our reliability problem is essentially a caregiving problem." There it was, the quiet thing, out loud. That night, the furnace in our building made its clanking genealogy of sounds, and the pipes performed their own opera. Noah slept with his hand fisted in my sweatshirt. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote an email to everyone who had messaged me privately that day. Warehouse lead, Dallas supervisor, a woman from finance, a driver who'd been written up for arriving late from a pediatric appointment. And I wrote, "We are not a risk. We are the reason anything works. If you're willing, I'm collecting stories. I will keep your names if you want. I will protect them if you don't. We're not going to get by. We're going to get heard." The article ran a week later with a headline that made my stomach drop and my chest rise at the same time. Logistics firm used reliability matrix to target caregivers, documents show. It had my name. It had quotes from others who chose to stand in the light with me, and those who chose the cover of anonymity, both equal in courage. It had screenshots of the spreadsheet, identifiers blurred, red dots intact. It had the legal context, the experts, the ethics. It had Aisha's recorded line, one sentence that no amount of PR could sand down. "We built a tool to make love a liability." Meridian announced an internal review. A law firm with a name that sounds like a bank issued a statement about unintended consequences. Trent resigned to pursue other opportunities. The CEO posted a LinkedIn essay about growth and humility that included a stock photo of a sunrise. They offered me a settlement that came stapled to a non-disclosure agreement thick enough to choke a river. Carmen and I looked at the numbers. Then we looked at each other. "They're paying you to make this disappear," she said. "What do you want?" I wanted groceries, rent, stability, a quiet life in which the only alarms were clocks. I also wanted a world where a mother can sit with her sick child without her job becoming a coin flip. I negotiated, not just for money, but for terms. A public apology, reinstatement offers to those pushed out under the matrix, paid leave policy reforms, caregiver protections, the dismantling of the tool and a published audit of how it had been used, a fund to support employees in crisis with no strings, Aisha's job protected, and her record cleared, a commitment to cease using legal exposure as an internal metric, ever. We traded drafts like fighters trading blows. Viv kept reporting. The comments on the story multiplied into the kind of chorus that creates change, the public kind, the private messages, the photos of kids in hospital gowns with thumbs up. Miss Ruth threw a "we don't whisper here" tea in her apartment, with lemon bars and legal pads, and we sketched the bones of a group that would help other parents without microphones scream on paper. We didn't win everything. Real life is not a courtroom drama with swelling strings. Meridian apologized publicly and scrapped the matrix. They created a caregiver council and expanded paid leave. They cut a check I could feel all the way to my bones. They didn't admit legal liability, because corporations would rather sprout wings than say those words. Aisha took a leave to sleep, and then came back to build something better from inside or to decide she couldn't. I won't tell her story for her. Trent emailed me a personal apology that read like a human wrote it, not a lawyer. I stood in my kitchen and read it 3 times, and then wrote back 2 sentences. "You told me to get by. I hope you learn to get human." Noah asked if I got my job back. I told him I got something different. I got a voice that didn't ask permission to be loud. I got enough money to buy groceries without doing math in the yogurt aisle. I got messages from people who said, "Your story saved me an hour of shame today." I got to watch my neighbor smile as the building held a meeting about community babysitting swaps and emergency contact chains like we were our own miniature nation. We started a small nonprofit with a big name. Get By is not a plan. We teach parents how to document. We connect them with attorneys who listen. We help them file complaints that stack into a wall. We tell stories that create consequences. We hand out forms and coffee and sit with people while they call HR in speaker mode so they don't feel alone. Sometimes we just hold hands. Sometimes that is the strategy. If you're here at the end, you know this already. The final twist is that there was never anything wrong with us. The defect is a design that pretends care is a glitch. The scandal is not the spreadsheet. The scandal is how normal it felt to the people who used it. The miracle is not that we changed one company. It's that we remembered we could make noise together, and the ceiling didn't collapse. It shook. The dust fell. We saw the beams. Here's where I ask you again, not as a ritual, but as a promise. Subscribe. If my story helped you breathe easier, if it made your jaw clench, if it lit something in your chest you thought was out, hit the button. It tells the machine we are not small, and tell me where you're watching from. Type it like a declaration. Harlem, third floor walk-up. Tucson, backseat of my car on my lunch break. Rural Arkansas, library Wi-Fi. Seattle, hospital waiting room. Drop it in. Draw the map of us. Maybe you're thinking, what if they do it again? They will. Somewhere, someone is renaming the same cruelty. That's why we keep the receipts. That's why we teach each other the words. That's why we refuse to get by. We don't whisper here. If you are a parent hiding in a bathroom at work, trying not to sob because daycare called and said your child has a fever, I see you. If you are a manager who knows the difference between a metric and a life, come sit with us and help rebuild. If you are the person who clicks the drop-down that says exit, remember that what you are selecting is not an inconvenience. It's a kitchen table. It's a child's chest. It's a mother's posture on a bathroom floor at 5:12 a.m., trying to call in and be believed. I still make coffee standing up most mornings. Noah still pronounces logistics like a toy that sparks. We keep the nebulizer clean and charged, and we keep a file folder labeled truth. We're doing better than getting by. We're living with our backs straight. Subscribe. Tell me where you're watching. And if you can't find breath today, borrow mine. We've got enough to go around.